Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 129 of The Breakdown. We are your hosts, Tanya Lee and Johanna Burkhart.
Hey, hey,
hey. Hey, hey, hey. I feel like that's our new line since I use hey, hey, hey a lot now. I feel like you're also picking it up. You're doing my hey,
Probably.
hey, hey.
It
I'm like,
seems to be
wait.
my new intro.
I got that from What's Happening Now when he walked into the door and it was Dwayne who went, hey, hey, hey. That's where
Oh
I
my
get it from.
gosh.
Yeah, I'm totally dating
No.
myself. I am old. So old. I just can't believe I noted that. So guys, tonight's episode, since last week, this whole month has been about mediumship. And last week we talked about medical mediumship. And this just happened to go, we didn't really plan this. It just happened to work out really well with how our guests lined up. But we also wanted to dive into intuitive eating and what that's all about. And we did play a little bit. We mentioned about how important food is with medical mediumship, but I wanted to go a little bit more into this. And I know, when we are more mindful and aware of things, this is where this intuitive eating comes from. So I did a little bit of research, as always. And I was like, okay, well, what does it mean to be an intuitive eater? Like, I know it's a mindful eater, but what would they consider like the actual definition of intuitive eating? So I looked it up. And it says that intuitive eating is an approach developed to help people heal from the side effects of chronic dieting. An intuitive eater is defined as a person who makes food choices without experiencing guilt or an ethical dilemma, honors hunger, respects fullness, and enjoys the pleasures of eating.
I
I was like,
love that
wow,
it said respectfulness.
right? I was
Because
like,
it's
wow,
true. How many people gorge themselves and eat more than
yeah,
when they're not full anymore, or when
yeah.
they're full?
So I thought that was a really good way of just putting it all together. I was like, well, that's a really good definition of it. But then I wanted to dive a little bit deeper because I'm like, well, where did intuitive eating come from? Where is it from? And so I looked up the history of it, and there was an article on healthline.com that the actual term wasn't coined until 1995. It's been around longer than that. It's a philosophy, prior even to the early 70s, based on other philosophies and other countries and so forth. But where this came from was a title of a book by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reach, based on the roots of earlier ideas from Susan Orbach, who wrote and published a book called Fat is a Feminist Issue in 1978, and Janine Roth, who had written about emotional eating in 1982. So this term has been around, but really the term comes from 1995, this book by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reach, which is interesting. I don't know too much about it, but basically the principles of all of these books is that diets don't work and that life changes and personal care are more important for long-term health.
It's true.
So, and it's interesting, because when we go in through the whole diet, and I know that was a big life lesson for me because I think I've tried every diet phase out there and fads, even exercise fads of what it was. I think I had every tape you can ever imagine back in the day.
I tried a lot of diets, and some worked, and some, but the one that worked in particular for me most of my life was a lifestyle change until it no longer served me. So but I was one of those people too. I yo-yo dieted.
Yeah, I was that same way. And like 4 or 5 years ago when I was at my heaviest, close to 300 pounds, I wasn't even intending to lose weight. I was just having an emotional breakdown at that point. I had the autoimmune disorder. I didn't know what was going on. And the weight really fell off to me when I started to go through these emotional healing, episodes and so forth. But we have a very special guest on here. Amanda Heisman, who's going to be joining us. And because it's boring when it's just us. I mean, I love talking with just Johanna, but we wanted to bring somebody who's really educated in this as well. So we are going to bring Amanda Heisman on board. Amanda is a nutrition, energy, embodiment coach, and intuitive eating teacher, guiding women to create joyful and easy relationships with food, body, and self. She does this through a different number of different unique modalities and methods, including intuitive eating, embodiment, organ channeling, and deep golden shadow and inner child work. She can read the nourishment body of humans, similar to a medical intuitive, and the vital energy body of plants. She's also a writer, speaker, alchemist, dancer, shaman, nature lover, and nomad. I can't, here's the thing about these mediums that we bring on board. They're never just one thing.
Hey, now.
They never are just one thing. So anyway, let's welcome Amanda on board.
There she goes.
Hey, you guys.
Hi, Amanda.
Welcome.
Or should I say, hey?
Yeah. Hey.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So let me ask you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the passion of intuitive eating and how you're utilizing your gifts? Because you are so many different things, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, aren't we all?
Yes, we are. We are. Never one thing. Everyone is unique.
Everyone is so unique. Yeah. So how I got into this is I spent the better part of a decade in corporate America, really kind of on a traditional trajectory with my life, if you will. I was in tech sales most recently. And that kind of ended with my wake up call with the stars aligning, I guess, after a car accident. I had a significant car accident and I had to kind of relearn my body. Prior to that, I had been quite like the work hard, play hard, high achieving, kind of typical operating from my masculine in this society person. So, I did sports and I ran triathlons and marathons, and I was, salesperson of the year and all the good stuff. And then this car accident just made me kind of reevaluate my life and relearn my body again. So that led to just a lot of different things. When I couldn't do all the things that I'd done before, it led to me exploring all these different alternative modalities, and nutrition was one of them. So I dove into my own research and reading around it, my own experimentation with my own body, because prior to that, I was really young and active, and I just ran or did this sport or that sport. I didn't think a whole lot about what I was eating. It was just there, So when I had to be really inactive with my recovery, I gained like 25 pounds, and something finally clicked, like, oh, if I can't go run 5-10 miles, maybe I should take a closer look at what I'm putting in my body. That led to eventually me leaving my corporate job and going back to nutrition school. And then from there, just following my path one step at a time. And I became, kind of what I would call a more traditional health coach at the time, helping people. And then that's where things got interesting, of where I started noticing tendencies in myself and others to really, there's a lot of similarities in all the dietary theories out there, but and then there's some differences, right? But I noticed people were kind of cozying up to this camp or that camp and becoming evangelists about these certain things that had worked for them. And I noticed myself getting really rigid in my eating. And after certain studies and experiences, they even taught us in nutrition school about this term called orthorexia nowadays, not anorexia, not bulimia, but orthorexia is kind of what you described as just being obsessed, being like not able to eat because you're just obsessed, like an unhealthy obsession with healthy eating, right? Mm. And so I started to notice that all around me, and I started to notice like just the almost an emotional attachment to these different dietary theories. And that's when my own intuition started to kind of open up and click in, and I was having all these very spiritual, mystical experiences that I couldn't explain, and starting to feel people's kidneys out of nowhere, and what's happening. There was a lot that unfolded in the last 6 years, but at that point, that's when I really started to say there's something not right here in the nutrition industry, right? And so I kind of started with different programs in an answer to what I saw in the nutrition industry. Like here's a holistic detox that addresses the emotional cleanse that inevitably comes up with a physical cleanse, right? Because I would get a little it'd be a little pet peeve of mine, all the different cleanses and detoxes out there. So I'd start with these little things and just notice the trends of emotional eating and just how connected everything is, right? The mental affects the spiritual, affects the emotional, affects the physical, and food affects everything. And Janine Roth was a big influence of mine, but I started talking about intuitive eating before I even knew it was a thing out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I found there's other people talking about this. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
But basically, I talk a lot about mindful eating, intuitive eating, and just the energy of nourishment in general, which to me, it goes along with a lot of sloughing off of cultural conditioning, which is a lot of like what you guys are, the questions you guys bring on this podcast, right? Like opening up the mind to new ideas and just kind of questioning everything that's been presented to us in society. And diet culture was part of that. So is it really necessary to have a meat and a starch and event, is that really necessary? And what are all these modern day technologies that aren't, or like modern day hazards, I call them, that aren't necessarily physiologically conducive to the human body, sitting and being in these boxes all day and things like that. And so it starts with really like an unprogramming and unlearning of what's been presented to us, because so much of it is subliminal and so much of it is presented as normal. It's real normalized, right? So stepping away from that energy of diet or restriction, or shoulds or should nots, and especially the energy of looking away from yourself for answers and turning inward to your own internal wisdom about, you have a wisdom inside of you that knows exactly how to nourish you, right? And so stepping into that energy of nourishment, through intuitive eating, it's really open and it's really free. It's really pleasurable. It's really divine. It's really sacred. It's our birthright, I feel. And when I talk about this, sometimes it feels really radical to people, or new. And I like to say it's only at this point, this idea of diet and obsession with what we eat is actually a really new idea in human history, right? Like throughout history, we've actually recognized the sacredness, like in the indigenous cultures and stuff, the sacredness of food and nourishing ourselves and gathering together to commune with each other over meals and things like that. So that's kind of a long answer to your question.
Yeah, no. And I think what's great it's funny because anytime we have a guest on board, I kind of look at certain patterns, and some of the patterns that I've seen, and Johanna, you can probably note on this as well, is that when anyone's when people fall into this, it's either something like happens to them, whether it's a car accident or something like there's a breakdown or something that breaks person down where they're basically learning something new, right? Learning the fact where like, I don't have this in my life now, and now I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting thing because, when we're healers, because that's all, really that's what we are, healers. We're healing ourselves, but it's almost like we go through these things because as healers, we can help to the level of, so people don't get to that level, so they don't have to get all the way to the rock bottom. So I think it's really interesting how you fell into it, but also with the education that you went around on this. And it's not just, utilizing what other people have taught you, but really utilizing it for you to figure out how you are going to help other people. So I think that's really interesting, that take on there. Do you feel like with intuitive eating, because it's so different than the diet fads, right? So is there a major difference in the philosophy of dieting and mindful eating? It's huge. It's a huge difference, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not even in the same camp. It's not like talking about veganism versus paleo or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Intuitive eating is not a diet fad. It's not a diet. It's not a fad, right? Like I think Johanna said at the beginning, lifestyle changes, which was always my focus, even before I knew what intuitive eating was, right? Like making lifestyle changes and sustainable habit over time always works over, you know, a 30-day diet or a 90-day diet or whatever it is. So yeah, that's one right there. Looking within, like learning about your own intuition and learning about your own body, looking within instead of like just a kind of a pat, you know, shoulds and should nots or eat and don't eat on a list. And also recognizing your own bio individuality, your own unique biochemical makeup is going to be different than the person next to you. There are some large universal truths about the human body. Like we all do really well with adequate water and vegetables and sleep and nature and love in our lives, right? We all do really well with those things, but there's a lot that's really bio-individual, and doing the experimentation rather than just so-and-so said this was good for me, so that's what I'm going to eat.
Yeah.
Is, you know, it's a really different energy. It's very, very different.
It must be challenging too when you're meeting with clients and stuff like that too, for them to get out of that headspace, right? Where like, well, no, this worked for Susie, so this should work for me because Susie lost 10 or 15 pounds, and they get kind of fixated and attached to it. And you know, that's so it must be a challenge to like break that down really. Like, okay, like let's talk about this. Let's talk about your eating habits or why it affects you, or why, you know, let's see if there's a bigger issue here.
Right. Mostly they get to me after they've after they've kind of gone through that with for themselves and realized, you know, oh, that's not going to work for me. But yeah, I mean, we talk through that. There's still a sense of, well, what should I eat? What's good for me? You know, and that's where I kind of love to use my gifts to help bridge the gap a little bit and channel the needs of the nourishment body, or their, what I call their inner nourishment goddess, which is just my term for their inner wisdom, right? Where their higher self meets their physical body. And kind of help out and tell them what I am intuiting, and kind of just help bridge that gap. Meanwhile, they're going through exercises to learn how to connect in for themselves. So
can you dive a little bit deeper into the key principles of intuitive eating, such as emotional eating, like some of the things that people run into that intuitive eating does help with?
Sure. I mean, as far as emotional eating goes, I have a lovely, I have a module in a couple of my courses called the eight causes of cravings, right? Like basically deconstructing a craving, and helping us kind of building new neural pathways, and knowing when is it an actual physical craving, when is it more emotional, what's going on for me hormonally, you know, things like that. And so there's times to break down a craving. Am I craving like ice cream, for example? Say I'm craving ice cream. Is that because it's sweet, right? Sugar cravings are a common craving out there. Is it because it's that like creamy dairy feeling, right? Like it's that kind of comfort that comes with that creamy dairy.
Right.
Is it just because it's cold, right? It's cold and I'm maybe overheated or something like that? Or is it maybe completely not physical and something like, I just need more sweetness in my life? Maybe what I actually need is a hug from someone I love, you know? So there's, and that was just an example, but there's quite a few different methods that, again, I pulled from Janine Roth a little bit on her, but you know, there's something to be said for like foods you had as a child that come up, or even, you know, if you had certain ethnic ancestral foods that run through your DNA, almost your blood, you know, like your family roots, that you might crave. So yeah.
I think that's really interesting too, because I know that most individuals, I know I did, and I do now, I find that I do that now. but do we think about what we put in our mouth or why we want it? I can
Right.
tell you when because I used to be I don't have time to make anything. I'm just going to go through the fast food thing. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to keep going. And I remember I was on my lunch break once and I had gone and I said, you know what? I'm just going to get a quick burger. I'm just going to get a quick burger and then I'll just get that. So I went to the fast food and I stopped and I went, why do I want this quick burger?
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, well, I'm hungry like right now and I want something rich. And so I went through that whole process and I found that by the time I got up there, I pulled out and I ended up going to the Wawa next to me and actually getting food, trying to like, real food. Like I was trying to
Yeah.
get like a salad and stuff like that. And I said, I don't really need this right now. I just, was thinking that I didn't have time to eat, but I actually do have time to eat.
Right.
I had 20 minutes and like I'm like I can eat a salad, I can do that. So I switched my mind frame, but my
Mhm.
mindset, but I think we get in habits, and
Yeah.
it's these breaking habits of like getting into something like it's got to be a quick meal or I need
Mhm.
something to fill me up really, really quick so I don't have those hunger pains or a headache. Because
Mhm.
I used to be able to go all day and not eat,
Mhm.
all day and not eat. I wouldn't even think about food. And then I would come home and be like, food.
Mhm. Yeah.
There was a whole different way for me to train myself to like eat during the day, to be aware, like I should be eating, like,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So, but it is interesting that you said that because I do feel that a lot of people don't do that. Like we don't sit there and dissect as to what we eat or why we need it or how does it make us feel?
Yeah.
How's it
Well,
make us feel?
how does it make us feel is a great question. And that's always one of the journal questions that we look at over time, like over a course of 2, 3 weeks. Once you start to get some good data in there, that's a great
Mhm.
question that people don't often realize how food is affect. How if I'm eating meat and dairy for lunch, this is how I'm going to feel. Or if I'm eating whatever, a nice salad with some whatever, this is how I'm going to feel. Um, and it's also one of those things where you kind of don't realize how good you're meant to feel until you start feeling that way, right? Until you kind of are like, wow, I can have vital energy all day. I don't have to have caffeine to start the day, sugar at the 2 or 3 p.m. wall, and wine to end the day, or whatever
Yeah.
people, um you made me think of something else, but I think I forgot.
I feel like I think it's really key though is the feeling thing is that I think that's a lot of times we don't take the time to do that. And I
Hmm.
don't feel like and Johanna, you can chime in on this too, but I don't feel like oh I think what happens a lot of times is especially with emotional eating, something that makes us feel good. It's like, like same thing with drinking too. Like, oh, I had such a bad day. I'm gonna have a drink to ease me down. But
Hmm.
but it's also that feeling, and I want you to go a little bit deep in this with you. What about the aspect of feeling guilty?
Hmm.
Like, oh, I can't have that because
Hmm.
it's going to do this to me. Because that's a
Yeah.
big part of it too, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely a big part of it. And just before I go into that, what you said was like the thing about time and the mindset shift is really like only the last 50 years have we been kind of living in this like microwave society of where everything has to be like quick, quick, quick. And especially in the West, right? If you go to maybe Europe or other places, they value like sitting down a little more. So those are some things like when we talk about mindful eating, like just actually sitting at the table or sitting with your loved ones, or even if you're a single person, like I sit by myself at the table and have that time with myself. When we kind of clear our mind, there's a lot like you taking that moment at the drive-through to kind of clear your mind, and actually there's a lot there. There's a lot of innate intelligence there and innate wisdom that comes through once you just kind of like let it, when you give it space to
Yeah.
come through, right?
And-
And
yeah.
so when we're so busy in this society, like so kind of cramped in with to-do lists and this and that, when we give ourselves a few breaths of time and space, when we sit at the table, we get out from behind the screens or the driver's wheel or wherever it is that we eat,
Mhm.
maybe light a candle or provide some ritual, say some grace or express gratitude in some way, just those sorts of things that might seem like obvious, but we're not doing, right? When we kind of do them and provide that space, you kind of naturally start to make better choices for your body, because you're just giving your wisdom space to come through.
Yeah, and it's funny because especially, and I always call it the boob tube TV,
Yeah.
where you passively start eating in front of a TV and you
Mhm.
don't even like, you're escaping, right? Like you're just like, oh, I just finished that bag of chips. What happened?
Yeah,
I'm not even aware of what I'm doing because you're in
right,
that escapism mode, right? Like this feels
right,
good, blah blah. There's no awareness. There's none. So
right.
that was a huge learning curve for me, was just mindfulness of
Yeah.
being, I remember like it was so new to me for putting food in my mouth and being like, what's it taste like? What? I gotta chew it. Like,
Right.
I have to
Yeah,
think
like
about this,
actually chewing your food. Yeah.
but enjoying it. And even to the point of the people I was around, I made an effort to make sure I put my phone down, that
Hmm.
I had limited conversation, like in the level of I was watching what I was eating while I was, having that conversation, because I just wasn't mindful of it. I had no awareness of it,
Yeah.
what I was putting in my mouth or what I was ordering, or.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this goes right into the guilt thing, because we kind of come back to societal norms around those things, right? And you're talking about a lot of things that are kind of normalized by society or accepted by society are those sorts of behaviors. And when your inner wisdom does come through, you might start to do things that other people think are radical, right? Like whatever, I was bringing food to the bar, and I was like, I went
Yeah.
one extreme and then the other, but and I don't have to do that, but I'm saying, like, uh for an entire year, I ditched cell phones and went off of social media, and, like, you know what I mean? There's just this kind of, what would happen if I didn't participate in all of the societal norms set before me. And one of the societal norms set before us, especially as women, is that we should look a certain way. We should eat certain things, right? This is just how it's been. That's what's been in front of us for so long. We don't even realize it. We think we should do this and we should not do that, right? So one of the
Yeah.
things what I started to notice for myself and encourage my clients to do is start to notice when shoulds come up, when the word should is coming out of your mouth, or should not, or whatever. That's a good indicator that you've got some sort of belief, or you're gonna, I always say, when you're making a choice, if the joy factor outweighs the guilt factor, it's a yes every time, right? So there's these moments, again, intuitive eating talks about being able to feel that food freedom and not guilt associated with food, whether you eat it or you don't. But there might be times that I have birthday cake, or I go out with my girlfriends for wine, because that's a nourishing experience for me, right? It's a holistically nourishing experience for me. And it's about that sort of freedom of not experiencing guilt around those things. And I fully and firmly believe and proclaim that no human should feel guilt around their eating and nourishment experience. It's the thing that keeps us alive. It's like the most natural thing to do in the world. So when we talk about guilt, we want to explore what the belief is underneath it, and what we thought we did right and what we thought we did wrong, and just kind of we go pretty deep in that. And that's where actually I use not only intuitive eating practices, but the shamanic nourishment journeys to even bypass the conscious mind and go straight into the subconscious mind, where we kind of store all our shadow and our golden potential and our inner beliefs around nourishment and food and body and self, and extrapolate what's there, so we can get a good idea as to what's the sticking point, what's the hook, what's the energetic or emotional hook underneath the relationship with food, that's causing guilt or other emotions to come forward.
Is that primarily the biggest thing that comes up in people? Is it the guilt, do you think? I mean, is it there a common thing that comes up?
It's a common thing. Yeah, there's 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 a few common threads I see, which are, yes, guilt, but underneath that is usually a worthiness story, right? Like it's usually a self-love. The relationship with food, body, self is just kind of a mirror for our relationship with ourself, right? For our self-love. And where we're lacking in that self-love, it's comes up in these things a lot of times. It could come up in other places, but that's a big one. And a lot of trends that I've been seeing lately has been what I would call the divine feminine rising. And so it's interesting, like, there's been this kind of global and collective healing of the masculine and feminine, which is a whole other topic. But the way I see it reflected in eating and with women I work with are, to just back up a second, when I read the nourishment body, I usually see colors inside the body or organs. So when I see a rose pink come through, that's another color. Like green is the typical heart chakra color, but when I see rose pink coming from the heart, it's this sign of the divine feminine, and it is usually a sign of self-love, where green is like that outward love, and healing, it's more like turned inward. And so with women, a lot of times to help that energy, we got to get up and move and dance, and we got to move in ways that feel intuitive. A lot of like actual rose petals or rose pink powder, rose hips, raspberry leaf. A lot of berries are really helping the divine feminine. Red clover is another good one. That's kind of known for menopause, but it's great for women of all ages. Has a lot of mineral content. Schizandra berry, and then just like, again, that stepping into your own sovereignty and your own power, and not looking outward but looking inward for answers is a big theme. Voicing expression is another big theme, because a lot of times when we swallow our own creative expression or emotions, it just shows up in the body, the issue in the tissues sort of thing. It just shows up somewhere else. So a lot of times, whether creative expression or in a relationship, there's a lot of expression that needs to happen. And we start with journaling, and then we use our voice. Just being a lot kinder and gentler to oneself. We all have this, like, we're all really tough on ourselves, I find. After coaching women for 6 years, we're all just like, we have this drill sergeant voice inside of our head, right? This inner critic that's constantly telling us we're not good enough, until we kind of shift that into, well, I am good enough. I'm a freaking goddess. I'm a badass, And when you live from that point, it's transformative all around, not just in your eating.
I mean, I 100% agree with you on that level. And, it brought me to my next question was, and you kind of honed in on this already, is with intuitive eating and exercise. And can you apply it to that? But you're basically going hand in hand with that, especially when you said the dancing and the movement, and like you're really, you can definitely apply both to it, correct?
So coming from like an athlete background where I was like really rigid about my exercise, this was also freedom for me, that I can move in a way, and that's what I even call it. I don't call it exercise or working out. I call it body movement, right? You can go move in a way that feels good. It doesn't have to be a huge workout. A little something, a little walk around the lake, a little dance party is sometimes all your body needs, right? Maybe it might needs the 3-mile hike or the super hard, whatever core workout thing, but maybe it just needs a fun dance party, and that brings you that joy and that ease that you were looking for throughout your day. A lot of times in the energy, I see 2 common movements for dance. I see people with like energetically, I see like a lot of scarf dancing, right? I see them have these layers of material, very colorful. And so I encourage women to do that like in the morning. But 2 common movements are just some bouncing, like up and down bouncing, to kind of get the lymph going. That really helps. And even when you come down on your heels, it sends like, it's a good grounding mechanism, and it kind of sends a stabilizing energy up the spine. And then hip circles, big, small, whatever, both ways. That's another way to really tap into your feminine, help digestion. it mixes the heaven and earth energy right in the core of the body. It's a big qigong movement as well. So those are common body movements that I see really help people, as well as just getting out on the on like barefoot on the earth a little bit, ground a little bit of outside time. Yeah. And
I love that. I love that more than the term exercise, that it's just movement and so forth, because I think sometimes exercise alone can be a little bit hindering for some people. Like, it's like, oh, I got to exercise today. But if you're like, I got to put some movement into it, it's like, all right, I'm going to swing my arms. I'm going to move around a little bit, get out of the office, or take a break from the kids.
Go on a walk, whatever people, I love dancing, but if that's not your shtick, go do something that you love to do. Move your body.
I'm not quite a dancer, but I would try.
Yeah, exactly. The only other thing that's coming up, like they're tapping on my shoulder here, is the common themes is the dehydration is a big common thing for people, staying really well hydrated. And obviously it has so many benefits for the human body, but also just energetically. Like if you think about the properties of water, it helps us go with the flow, right? It helps us kind of move through our life a little easier and be like water, right?
Can we step onto that a little bit with water? Because there's I feel like there's a lot of trend right now with coconut water. Mm-hmm. Or alkaline, like make sure you have high on there. So can you tell us a little bit as the different, because I was like, water is water. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, depending on the state, the province, the region you're in, water may have been treated in one way, shape, or form, like to come through the tap, right? It's probably got chlorine and a number of different chemicals. I love drinking. There's a website called findaspring.com, where there's access to natural spring water before it's been treated. And you can find it across there. People enter spots in all across US and Canada. That's one that it has natural occurring minerals that are often stripped when we treat the water. Other than that, coconut water is great. It has, it's actually was used as a substitute for blood in the Korean War, when it has properties really similar to blood plasma. When they couldn't get blood right away for soldiers, they used coconut water.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's very hydrating. It's like special hangover trick, get rid of your hangover really fast with coconut water. So yeah, there's lots of different waters out there. I used to drink alkaline water before I got it, before I started drinking spring water, where they alkalize and ionize and all these things. That's one where I honestly, ever since I started drinking spring water, I felt so good. I haven't done the research in a couple, 2 or 3 years, but alkaline water is also great for you. And some of that will be like, if you live in the country with a well, you might already have alkaline water.
Not always though. Like my well is
not always, no.
My well is, we can't drink it. It's loaded with copper. It's loaded with copper. And so, I drink Fuji water, or I just fill up big jugs of water that's been filtered, and then I just put it in crystals and allow it to sit overnight with affirmations on them and things like that, to program the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so absolutely, there's plenty of ways to do that as well.
Spring water tastes and I love spring water. It tastes so different than what because I used to drink well water. I live so it's has a little bit of a different taste anyway, but I can't even drink tap water now. But the spring water has such a different profound taste to it. I love it. Yeah. But I can't quite grasp what it tastes like. It's just got a different taste to me, but I love it. Mm-hmm. So are there any common foods that you feel like, and I know this is hard because you're putting like a whole bunch of group of people together, but are there common foods that you find that the average person does lack in their nutrition that you could just right off the bat go, okay?
The average person usually doesn't have enough vegetables and fruit. We kind of think of the meat and the carbs as the main thing, or like the main event. I usually invite us to think of those things as more like condiments, right? More like the side dish, and like veggies, whether cooked or raw. A lot of my meals have like a big salad, then maybe a squash, or some sort of root veggie based thing, with the other stuff is kind of an aside. Fruit and vegetables for sure. Berries are so healing and transforming. Zinc and magnesium are two common deficiencies that I see, and those are easy to get in like nuts and seeds, avocado, dark chocolate, proper cacao, not a candy bar, right? That's but those are common deficiencies, and zinc and magnesium are two things that do a ton in the body, and are often tied to like those things right there: being well hydrated, having lots of fruits and vegetables. Like greens are the number one most missing things in Western diets, and the number one most nutrient dense things. So you'll get a large range of nutrient profile just by rotating different kinds of greens throughout your eating and throughout your week, and the zinc and magnesium. So sometimes people supplement, sometimes they just have more of the foods that have them, but I see a ton of stuff clear up, a ton of low level symptoms clear up just by those things.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So when you have a client come in, because since you touch on so many different aspects, have you had any cool stories that you want to share with us on individuals that you really were able to like help with just intuitive eating, or just changing that style for them?
Sure. There've been a lot of cool things. Two coming to mind are just I had one gal who was in her mid 30s, stage 4 endometriosis, always really painful cycles, had surgeries, at that point to clear scar tissue, had one ovary removed, was told she was never going to be able to have a family. And we just changed a couple little things in her eating. Now she has a healthy 1-year-old with her partner. She was able to, from that point, her cycles became regular. She never had like regular periods, right? And she started actually having a proper period every month. And then she conceived and gave birth to Emilio about a year ago now. So that's one that was just so joyful, like just being a small part of a big change of her life was like new life in the world. It's pretty cool. Another one.
The healing really is on them too, and they must feel a lot of joy, the fact that they were able to crack this down. Like the fact that you kind of showed them the way, but then when they start doing it, taking the actions on themselves, that must be really rewarding for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just holding the space. They're the ones doing all the work, right?
When you work with a client and I noticed when you were talking about like working with their organs, and you said you don't ever take foods away or say you shouldn't or should not have it. But like for me, I want to use my example because I'm currently healing hypothyroidism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I didn't say never take foods away.
Oh, okay. But for me, like, so I've done all the emotional work. I've done the emotional work. I ate really well. I ate I did a lot of practicing in Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine and all these things. And something was still off for me. Mm-hmm. And so I went in, actually, I found it through mirrored DNA work with a client. I found my own issue, and then it was confirmed to me. So anyway, moving forward, what I have come to realize going down this rabbit hole and working with my spirit team, and I want to get your take on it because I feel this is what I've been shown, is that there's going to be a rise in things like that happening, like our hypothyroidism and other issues. not just because of, say, the chemicals in the food or poor diet or emotional overwhelm, but also on the things that you were talking about in the beginning, which is the rampant amount of technology, EMFs coming in, even the crystalline energy that's coming into the new earth now is different than it's ever been before. And it's coming in so intently that our pineal gland and all the other parts of our body that is, our bodies are primitive. They're delicate. Mm-hmm. It can't keep up, right? So I've had to take certain foods away that are nutritious, to bring my body back into balance and bring in other supplements. So when you're working with somebody, when do you get that kind of information? Like, these are the things that could be causing this issue. Hey, let's tweak here. And then also, do you get the same guidance as far as like the technology aspect and how it's the changes that it's having on our body?
Good question.
Yeah, great question. So you're right in the sense of like, we're in an unprecedented time, and we're like, we're kind of experiments here, and we're all experiment, right? But you're also right in the sense of the body is the last thing to upgrade. When we're going through these like whatever people want to say, right? Everybody has a different languaging around this, but 5D or spiritual upgrading or whatever the case, ascending, whatever the case may be. The body, like people talk about ascension symptoms, right? Because your spirit does its thing, your emotions does, like the emotional body does its thing,
and they're real. Other body symptoms are real.
They're 100% real. And the physical body is the last thing to kind of catch up. And so you just got to be really kind to it. Like, it sounds like you've been doing and experimenting and like, yes, like taking away certain foods in order to upgrade or whatever the case may be, right? Like, there's times when people are so attached to, right, like staying vegan or something like that. I'm just using an example.
Yeah.
Staying vegan or something like that, but they might need to have just a little animal food to help like ground their bodies, right? Their bodies might really need that. But our bodies are, and a lot of times we talk about like people are like, oh, I'm just we call them a meat suit or something, like just of spirit being having a human experience, which I get, but like this idea that we're like, we chose these physical bodies to walk around in this light, to take us through this lifetime. So they are here to teach us something. And yes, 100% with the EMF and the different technologies coming through, we have no idea how that's going to affect us yet. And when I'm working with clients, what I see comes through in a lot of different ways. It could be a color. It's often a color associated with a different chakra system, or I'll feel where the organs are not need supported or aren't corresponding, like aren't how I see a spinning with a certain chakra system, energetic system, and then the information that comes through is like the 1, 2, maybe at the most 3 things that are the next priority for them right now. Kind of the way the universe doesn't give us the 50-year plan. It gives us like, what's the right now, like what's the next illuminated step in front of me. So that's how I work with people in presenting to them what would be best for them right now. And yeah, sometimes it might come through as it doesn't come through as specific, like I don't always say you need to move away from the cell tower. I say you need to have less screen time and more outside time. That's more, it's usually more in the positive, but there are some times that they'll say get rid of this food group or do this, like there are some takeaways versus some add-ins. But yeah, that's usually how it comes through. And sometimes I don't actually know I don't know the whole story, right? Like sometimes I do, but sometimes but sometimes it's like this lady, her kidneys were like calling to me. like, like help, right? And I didn't want to be alarmist because I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I was like, we're gonna support your kidneys. We're gonna do some beets. We're gonna do some lemon water, just simple, gentle things. And then we did a extended kidney cleanse. And she actually passed several kidney stones into the toilet. And she told me later, Amanda, every time I touched that area of my body prior to this, it was hard. Like it was hard. Like she could actually feel her kidney stones and didn't realize it, right? And she said, now when I touch that kind of back middle part of me, it's soft, like my fingers indent in what kind of a woman's middle is. And so that was one of the first times I was like, okay, there's something going on. But yeah.
What is your take on food allergies for people who have specific food allergies? Do you think it's an actual allergy to something else, or like what is your take on that?
Yeah, so yes, and I think it's kind of both. Like there are actual physical allergies, right? There are actual physical allergies, but I do believe they all have a grounding in something like energetic that we can address. So
I agree with that, because I think if your parents are always fighting at the dinner table and it correlates with a certain meal or a certain food, it's almost like your body attaches it to that energy, to that food that you're putting in your mouth, and creates an intolerance, so the energetics of it is, I'm with you. I think that it takes a huge play in it.
Yeah, it 100% does. And it's, as you guys know, it's not like I'm going to be magically healed and like, once it's like it's a unlayering, it's a very deep thing. And so that can be frustrating when people hear that, like, what, like, I can just change that, like, bullshit, like, how am I, something that people have been dealing with for, I felt that way about my spine before, like, where I know it's me, I know it's all within me, but geez, like so many years of dealing with, chronic pain or something like that, of course, like it's frustrating. But yeah, 100%, I do believe that when we like drill down, we can get rid of those things.
Do you have any, because we're getting at the tail end here, do you have any special tips or any kind of like hot tips that we can give for intuitive eating for people who are just starting out on it? No, it's a big question.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on them, but to sum up, I would say just start really simple. Don't overwhelm yourself with a big to-do list. I would say, I talk about like the big 5, like pick one of them: water, vegetables, sleep, movement, or gratitude or love or appreciation in your life. Pick one to focus on. The things like mindful eating, sitting down at the table with yourself with no phone and no screen, and your loved ones, and being present for the meal, chewing your food, maybe start a food journal. And you'll start to notice, it's interesting as you start to notice. And when we say how food is making you feel, I talk about how does it make your belly feel? Are you having proper BMs, and how to make your energy feel? Like your belly and your energy, you can kind of get a lot from that. So like those are just a few things, but like whatever was the one that jumped out to you is probably the one that's going to be most effective for you as you get started. And I do free first like 20-minute readings and calls. So if you'd like to connect, I can certainly help you hone in on what would be best for you.
Yeah, we were just going to get into your shameless plug and you already went into it. There you go.
Shameless over here.
I'm part of your Facebook group, and I can say that you're on quite frequently, and the tips that you give on there and the readings, I am always amazed with how much you do give out just in that group in general, and it's very informative. So so I do highly recommend it, and we're going to have all of that information in our description box. You can go to her website too, amandaheisman.com. And, we're really happy to have you on board and to come here and to teach us a little bit about it and our audience. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I am happy to connect with any of them and have them in my Facebook group. The last thing I'll say is I do have this 5-week group program starting next week. So if anyone wants to contact me about that, it's called Unleash Your Inner Nourishment Goddess, all about looking within for the answers. And it kind of brings together that triune I talked about of nutrition science and food psychology and energy work. So if anyone's interested in that, definitely contact me.
Oh, I love that. That sounds like a great time to have it.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? Leading up, like gearing up for 2020, I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, especially when everybody gets in that New Year's resolution where they're, in that mind frame, you can break it.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks you guys for having me. This has been real fun.
Oh no, well, thank you. So next week, guys, we have another medium on board, a message medium. Diana Palm's going to be on, and we will be going more into mediumship. But till next time, we will see you.
Bye, guys.
And bye, guys. Take care.